The supernatural world surrounds us. Sometimes it manifests to people like you and me. You'll hear stories about this, so much more right here on Supernatural Confrontations. Our guest tonight is Peter Wojnowski. We'll be talking about what happened at Fatima, but more to sort of drill in on the life of Sister Lucia, who was the only seer to survive into adulthood. And it's right down the conspiracy rabbit hole. That's where we're going to go. But first, a word from our trusted sponsor. As we age, our body's natural collagen production declines, leading to visible signs like thinning hair, brittle nails, joint discomfort, and worst of all, wrinkles. That's right. Collagen, or the lack of it, is one of the leading causes of wrinkles and sagging skin. Unfortunately, most collagen typically found on store shelves don't provide the right type or amount of collagen necessary to combat wrinkles. This is why I use multi-collagen. And folks, I'm obsessed with the results I'm seeing on my skin. Multi-collagen provides the 5 types of premium collagen that my skin needs to look more youthful. I've seen smoother skin, more elasticity, fewer lines, and a more youthful glow. Plus, it easily mixes with coffee or tea or whatever you want to mix it with and has zero flavor. Grab your bag now and it's 51% off only at healthwithla.com. That's healthwithla.com. Plus, order today to also receive free VIP live health and fitness coaching for life, a free ebook titled The 14 Foods for Amazing Skin, a 60-day satisfaction guarantee, and free shipping with your order. Once again, this limited time offer is only available at healthwithla.com, healthwithla.com. Check it out, folks. I take it as often as I possibly can. Peter, thanks so much for joining us here. I really appreciate it, sir.
No problem. Thanks for having me. We should have an interesting discussion, I think.
I think so. Okay, so we differ on what was going on, what the apparition was, and that's fine. But what we want to talk about is Lucy.
Right.
And just give us the thumbnail sketch. She's like the oldest of the seers.
She's the oldest of the seers, 10 years old when the apparitions happened in May 1917 until October 1917, where there was the great miracle of the sun. And they were shepherds for their families. And each month there was an apparition of the woman, the lady, as they called her, who later was shown her, said that she was the Blessed Virgin. She gave herself as the title Our Lady of the Rosary, actually, in October. And so these seers, for these months, from May to October, every month on the 13th, they would have this apparition. She would come to them and reveal a message. The only interruption was in August of 1917, because on August 13th, they were actually kidnapped. The children were kidnapped by the local Freemasonic mayor. The Freemasons had taken control of Portugal in 1910. And so I guess they saw these apparitions as a threat to the state. You're going to start some fanaticism or whatever they think. And they were threatened with being boiled in oil if they didn't reveal the 3 secrets that Our Lady had entrusted to them in July of 1917, in the apparition in July. Of course, that takes us to October, the last apparition, the miracle of the sun happens. It is due to a request by Lucia. So this shows you her importance. She requested a miracle so that all may believe. That it was her request that produced the miracle in October, and she was told that it was going to be in October. And so the miracle happened. It was reported all over Portugal, even by the Masonic press that existed at the time. It was also reported by the New York Times. You can still see pictures of the apparition site and the people there while it was occurring. It was published in the New York Times. So there were, and 70,000 people were there on the ground to see the miracle. But so, of course, that brought great fame to Lucia, and her cousins, of course, would die from the Spanish flu in 1919 and 1920. She would survive, but she was warned by her cousin Jacinta that her life was in danger. And so the local priest took that seriously and brought her to Lisbon to try to put her in a school to try to hide her out. Um, but it didn't work. She ended up um, joining get because the Blessed Virgin told her to become educated, to learn how to read and write. And so she went to a school in Lisbon, the Dorothean Sisters. She was trained by them and then became a Dorothean nun, which is like a semi-contemplative order, but active, contemplative combined. However, in 1948, she would join the Carmelites, and the Carmelites are a contemplative, cloistered order. And if you know anything about the traditional Carmelites, for example, they could only speak through to others, even their own family, through a grill. And in the traditional Carmelites, they wear a facial veil, covering half their face when they're in the presence of outsiders. And Sister Lucy herself had to be surrounded by the other nuns, even when she was meeting with people through the grill. So they kept but some of it was because it was her. Some of it was because that's just what they do with Carmelites, and that's their life. But so she lived this contemplative life until, according to the official narrative, 2005, when she died and met with Paul VI, John Paul II, in the very famous meetings. One was in 1967, in the 50th anniversary of Fatima, the Fatima apparition. One was right after the assassination attempt on John Paul II. That happened in 1981. He met with Sister Lucy in 1982. And then a number of times after that, she appeared in public many times after that. She was interviewed many times after that, and she appeared specifically in the year 2000 when Jacinta and Francisco were beatified by John Paul II in the year 2000. She made a very public presentation of herself. And so this was the life of Sister Lucy. From the 70s on, she was supposed to have written a number of books and, giving interviews, keeping in touch with people via letter and meeting them, in various ways in the convent, and having this very public persona. And so my own interest is that basically, I'm a PhD in philosophy, so I have that academic career. However, about the year 2000, I started speaking for Father Nicholas Gruner at the Fatima Center about the topic of Fatima. Sister Lucy, the third secret, not so much Sister Lucy, but the third secret, the Tui apparitions, the miracle of the sun was one thing that I would specialize in, if you will. And I did that until 2017, 2 years after Father Gruner had died. So speaking about Sister Lucy and Fatima for a long time, it was a surprise when I ran into the articles on a website called, two articles on a website called Tradition and Action by a lady, Dr. Marian Horvat, who pointed out that there was a problem between pictures of early Sister Lucy and pictures of later Sister Lucy. That pricked my interest initially because I had never known there was a problem. To be honest with you, I hardly, other than seeing pictures of Sister Lucy as a child, I cannot, I can honestly not remember seeing pictures of the later Sister Lucy. I just didn't. And no one, I mean, there were very few voices who even intimated that there could be a problem.
Peter, when you talk about a problem, let's by that. I need to know.
I mean by the problem.
Yeah,
Well,
what the problem is.
yeah, was the woman that saw the apparitions at Fatima and was the seer of Fatima, the only one child who could speak to the Blessed Virgin, hear her, and see her all at the same time. Whether she, who was a Dorothean nun in the 1920s and 1930s into the 1940s, and became a Carmelite in 1948,
Right.
and was a Carmelite in the 1950s, and we have authenticated letters, pictures of that fact. Whether she was the same woman who appeared with Paul VI at Fatima in 1967 and with John Paul II and in other situations, private situations and within the Carmel and outside, from 1982 to her death in 2005. Was it the same woman? And because looking at the pictures, very poor quality pictures, but pictures nonetheless, the ones that Dr. Horvat had at the time,
Right.
in these two articles, I looked at them and said, whoa, this is strange. There's a problem here. So a friend of mine said, well, why don't you look into it? And I said, okay, but I want to look into this problem in a scientific way. I want to get the best, most updated forms of analysis and top-rated specialists who could look at the evidence, the video evidence, the pictorial evidence, the handwriting evidence, video evidence, look at all that evidence and tell me whether this woman who appears from 1917 to 2005 is one woman or more than one woman. Yeah. And there was also a question that we had to settle. Was it, because we ended up, after looking at all the reports that came in, and we'll talk about those, we had to make the judgment that there was an imposter put in the place of the real Sister Lucy anywhere from 1958 until 1967. Okay, that's the broadest reach. I personally think it was at the end of 1958 or the first half of 1959 from the evidence that I've seen. Whether that imposter was just one woman or was it multiple women? And so we also put this question to the specialists, to the experts, and they ended up saying that there was only one imposter through that entire period, from her first appearance in 1967 until her death in 2005. We call this enterprise, which is tax-exempt activity, educational activity, Sister Lucy Truth.
Right.
So we've investigated the question of whether it was the same woman or whether there was an imposter. and now we're still looking into that, various methods that are being used to try to look at it from a different angle, but also the question of, well, what happened to the real Sister Lucy, and who was this woman that took her place?
Let me jump in here, and I realize that I have a completely. We've talked about this off air. I have a totally different take than you do on Fatima. Completely from all my research. And by the way, when Father Gruner was alive, I did correspond with him. So good. And I think I'm pretty sure I spoke to him at least once or twice on the phone.
Yeah,
This was in the early days.
sure.
My research said that Jacinta ate and drank, and Lucia ate and drank, but only Francisco ate, did not drink. So the two girls could see and hear the apparition, but Francisco could see her but couldn't hear her. That's what my research turned up.
There was different levels. So Francisco could see,
Right.
um
Couldn't hear.
so right, Jacinta could see and hear her, but she didn't speak to her. Lucia was the only one that spoke to her.
We you mentioned the parish priest, Father Fiera, and all of our research, all of my research, we source Father Fiera's handwritten documentation.
Sure.
So let's get back to the so-called secrets, and Lucia is cloistered away, and then all of a sudden there's a switch, and we have to ask ourselves why. That's work. Why would they do that?
Sure.
Why would they? Because the imposter is promulgating the so-called third. Just bear with me, and I know
Sure.
we're not going to agree on this, and that's fine. So you're gonna stay on your side of the aisle. I'm gonna stay on my side of the aisle. But we can be brothers in Christ and talk about it.
Yeah.
My research would say that there was no third secret originally, and that it was concocted well after the fact that she goes into the convent. So here's the what if, and here's the why. That third secret of Fatima was promulgated for decades. What if Lucia, the real Lucia, this is my answer to it. This is my why. The real Lucia wasn't going to go along with this, and so she didn't. And they said, well, that's not going to fly because we have millions of people believing the so-called apparition, so they do the switch. The question is, well, do they kill her? Does she die of natural means? Does she go some other place? What have you discovered as far as the real Lucia, or what you think is the real Lucia?
Let me just mention one thing about the third secret. So it was written down in 1944. And because she was ill and they thought she was going to die. I think she had the Spanish flu. It came back, and they thought she was going to die. But interestingly enough, she did it. She says with fear and trembling, writing down the third secret. It must have been something, a message that to her was even worse than what she had heard in the second secret about World War II and nations being annihilated, and Russia spreading its errors throughout the world. It must have been worse than that. So I do think, I mean, if you're just looking at it from an empirical point of view, I think the third secret had something to do with it. Because remember, there was a buildup to the release of the third secret
Right.
in 1960,
Right.
because Our Lady conveyed to Lucia that it had to be released by 1960 or upon her death, Lucia's death, that the third secret had to be released. So, at least in Catholic circles, but I don't think just in Catholic circles. I mean, my mother remembers, as she was like a teenager, and there was really a buildup, like what would it say, because this is in the middle of the Cold War.
Right.
And so there's this incredible interest, and it was sort of known for a long time that it was supposed to be revealed by 1960. And then, John the 23rd, he was elected in late October 1958. His plan was to revolutionize the church, and he opened up the third secret apparently. And remember, he announced the calling of the Second Vatican Council in January of 1959, which would be sort of the French Revolution within the Catholic Church, as we'd call it. They were definitely probably more, shocking. But so there was this buildup. But when John the 23rd read the third secret, and he had these two Portuguese translators with him, he folded it back up. He heard it. He folded it back up and said, put it away, and said, this is not for my pontificate. It's not for my time. When that was exactly the time that it was supposed to be released, and it was for that 1959, 1960. It was to be released, but it wasn't. And there was some news bulletin put out by, I think, the Vatican news agency, saying that it would never be released, that it would be sort of filed in a vault somewhere. I'm paraphrasing. Filed in a vault somewhere, and no need to worry about it. And there was incredible letdown on the amongst the people at this moment, because it had been built up, and then all of a sudden it wasn't released. And so there was speculation, at this time, when the Blessed Virgin told Sister Lucia that wasn't she, she put an envelope, she gave it to her bishop, the bishop gave it to the Vatican, but it wasn't meant to be for the Pope. It wasn't meant to be for his eyes only. It was meant to be for the world. And suddenly the message for the world is not released at all. And then, well, so I think, if I could judge in a semi-empirical way, you have to consider history and historical fact and try to investigate this whole thing. I think, the switch would have had to occur then, because I don't believe the real Sister Lucy would have kept that third secret when she was, that was sort of one of her main tasks, if not the primary task, which to make that secret known. And then supposedly, just one last thing, supposedly the Vatican, because everyone was still talking about it. Father Gruner was always sort of making trouble about it, quote unquote trouble. God bless his soul. And he was always making trouble for them, demanding the release of the third secret. They released, in the year 2000, they released what I would call a vision, a description of a vision, without any explanation of what the vision meant.
Mm-hmm.
As you know,
Right.
about an angel holding this like a sword, and a man in white walking up a hill to a cross,
Right.
and sort of churchmen and lay people following behind through a half desolate city, and then being shot with guns and arrows and dying, killed. And when the Vatican released the third secret, what was supposed to be the full extent of the third secret in 2000, it was just this vision without explanation.
I remember.
They explained it as, well, this is about communism and the suffering of the church under communism, and this vision of this man, Bishop in White, as he was called by Lucia, was John Paul II,
Right.
and this is a description of the assassination attempt,
Right.
which of course makes no sense.
When they revealed this whole thing, I looked at it and said, "Well, this is completely bogus." I want to ask you something.
Did you at the time?
Oh yeah, I mean, I when they released it, I said, "Well, this has nothing to do with anything."
Right. No, no.
Made this thing up. But see, when we went over there, I was over there in Fatima for 2 weeks, and we interviewed all these people on the other side of the aisle, my side of the aisle. And what's interesting is the handwritten record from Father Fiera, the parish priest. Russia is never mentioned in them. It's not mentioned. There are no secrets until much later, until Lucia is in the convent. And then all of a sudden, these secrets come out. And what bothers me more than anything is if this thing is real, why not, why not publish the letter in Portuguese? Here's her handwriting. This is it. But they don't do that. They just concoct this other.
Or the third secret?
Yeah, the third secret. So I don't think there were anything like that.
Well, that was part of our investigation, and we found something. We had a handwriting expert, Bart Baggett, who's a famous American
Okay.
specialist, and he looked at the text released by the Vatican in 2000, and he indicated that it was authentic, that it was authentically her writing this vision. But the question is this the entirety of the third secret? That's the question. I mean, is this just sort of the visualization of something, but the explanation of it is kept hidden? That's what I think. And then they give a new explanation. They read something.
Redo the whole thing. But
They read something.
Let's go back of a smoking gun. Who has the power to do the switch? Well, the Vatican has the power to do the switch. Yes. They have all the cards. But the question is, once again, why? I mean, why would they do the switch? I mean, if she's gonna die, then okay, she's dead, and they hold the funeral. Right. And says, well, that
you're sharing with me the investigative thoughts.
right.
I thought one thing,
something deeper is going on here.
No, absolutely something.
Got to be something deeper.
Some concoct the idea that that they were working together because they're dealing with this fact that we've shown beyond a shadow of a doubt. I mean, if we can present our evidence to the Ohio State Coroners Association, and the coroners say, well, of course there's two different people.
Wow.
This happened just on May 9th, 2025, so just a little over a month ago. I went there and presented our case, but if it's so overwhelming, the question is, well, why?
Why go through all the machinations where they have to go through? Let me
also, well, one thing, why, you have to, what if you're caught out? What if you make the switch and you're caught out?
Now what?
Or down the line.
So May 9th, the coroner said that these were two different people.
The coroners, I made a presentation to the entire body of the coroners conference.
Wow.
They have a yearly conference.
Okay.
This year was in Columbus, Ohio, and on May 9th, I gave my presentation. Over 100 coroners were there. The room was really packed.
Wow.
And, it was an hour-long presentation, video, and my reading of the text. And I just presented our scientific reports.
And what was the conclusion of the coroners?
Well, I asked them at the end of it, because I was interested, because that's my purpose of going.
Right.
Saying, well, who thinks that they were the same person? Who thinks that they were only one person? And nobody raised their hand.
Well, okay, I got to stop you there. That's that.
Yeah.
You just say that again, folks. You need to listen to this.
Yeah.
Peter is lecturing. There's at least 100 coroners in the audience. These are all pros. These are professional coroners. They're not weekend coroners. This is what they do. And Peter presents his evidence. How many people think this is the original body? Not a hand goes up. Pick it up from there, please.
Yeah, I said, and then they shouted, from the audience, they shouted, "Nobody does." Nobody does. I mean, that's how overwhelming they're feeling. Nobody does. And then I asked, well, who thinks there's, two people involved? And the hand shut up and they shouted from the audience, "Everybody does." So I have a letter testifying to that. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have not, no.
I have a letter. It's on Twitter and it's on our recent video that we produced, and I put that up on Twitter. But can I read it to you?
Please do.
Find? Okay, it's on. Can you see this? This is on.
Yes,
I can see that. Okay, it's on the heading of the Office of the Highland County Coroner, and the Highland County Coroner is Jeffrey Beery, M.D. He's the coroner, and he wrote this letter, this testimony. And he says, "Dear Dr. Hoynovsky, thank you for traveling to Columbus, Ohio this past week to address the Ohio State Coroners Association. I found your presentation very helpful in slowly, logically, and methodically breaking down the components of visual identification. All of us Ohio coroners and investigators do this primarily intuitively by looking at pictures, but breaking down the science of this with expert letters from world-renowned scientists will be helpful to me and many others for future use in our legal obligation to properly identify the deceased." And now the final paragraph. More specifically, the photographs of Sister Lucia, the Fatima visionary, showed a clear fraud.
Wow.
Pre-1960 Lucia visionary was replaced by an imposter in 1967. The evidence you presented was completely convincing to this point, and 100% of our coroners and coroners investigators present at the meeting, totaling well over 100, all agreed that they were two different people. I hope that the proper legal authorities will investigate this because it points not only to fraud, but possibly murder. Thank you for your important work, and please keep me posted on any new information as it comes to light. Sincerely, Jeffrey Beery, M.D., Highland County Coroner.
That's a smoking gun, Peter. I mean, that's a smoking gun.
Science applied to this question.
Have you gone to the Vatican with this or tried to get it to the Vatican? How have you gotten before you?
Yeah, people that have contacted me who work with the Vatican have presented it to some group of cardinals. But it's all very hush-hush, very sotto voce, because it's a secret of the highest order.
I agree.
It's a state secret of the highest order. If they presented an imposter as the real visionary of Fatima, I mean, to Catholics, that's like a massive thing, Fatima. And the visionary of Fatima, remember, she's the only living visionary of Fatima since 1920.
Right.
And she was presented in all these occasions and appearing with these popes and, and if that was a fraud,
Huge.
the implications are incredible. So people back off, and you tell people, many people, you tell them, they're convinced, but I've had investigators who have investigated, who've done movies on, people who took up false identities, 500 false identities. And they backed off this. They didn't want to touch this.
Wow.
They didn't want to touch this because
Let me throw you. I'm going to throw you a huge curveball.
okay.
Okay, I'm going to apologize before I even.
Can I get a drink and some ice
You
tea?
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to throw you a huge curveball. So I've been to Fatima, and it's big business. The Fatima Sanctuary can hold 1 million people. It's dialed in. It's a beautiful. I mean, whether or not you believe in and what the Catholics, what you guys believe in, that it was Mary of the Bible or something else, which is what my take is. But you have to admit that the place is dialed in. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful representation of what people can do to honor something. And in our film, we say, we're not going to disparage what people believe in. People have the right to believe in, and we're not going to do it on this show right now. But here's the curveball. Lucia, she's 10 years old. When she's 18, she's moved into a convent. We know from Father Fiera that Russia is never mentioned in the handwritten documents. That's a fact. And that the secrets don't come to light until after Lucia is in the convent. What if she gets to a point, and you remember at this time, and you walk into the sanctuary, there's just shop after shop after shop. It's millions of people go there on a to pilgrimages every year. I mean, millions of people. So it's a huge deal, like you were saying. Here's the what if, here's the curveball. What if Lucia gets to the point where she realizes, because she's older now, she's not a teenager, she's not in her 20s, and she realizes that I've been manipulated. This isn't what I saw. I've been railroaded. I'm not playing this game anymore. And she rebels, and that's it.
Yeah. See, I take it the other way. Because Russia was mentioned. Russia was mentioned in the apparitions, but uh, the Blessed Virgin said that she would come back later and ask for the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary.
And we've seen interrupt.
And the children were like,
It's not in
not quite knowing what Russia was,
I get that, but if it was so important, it would be in the handwritten records by Father Fiera, and it's not there. I mean, we did a deep dive on this. It's not in Father Fiera's handwritten records. It comes much later.
Well, it was in the July apparition, but and she spent a good part of her life like behind the scenes pressuring, that's not the right word, from a convent, from a nun, but well, for Sister Lucy it almost is. So pressuring Pope Pius XI, Pius XII to consecrate Russia, because technically they're the ones that were supposed to do it. It was supposed to, because she passed the message on to the Vatican in 1929. So it was supposed to be done.
He did the consecration a couple of years back when they did the dual, one in Fatima and one in Rome. That was pretty impressive.
Recently,
I think it was in Kiev. Was it in Kiev?
no, I don't. Yeah, I didn't pay much attention to that, but I know what you're talking about with France. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. But
let's go back to the
I
life.
think the other way, I think it's that they didn't want to reveal the true third secret. And
To get rid of her,
because why didn't they, if they had a fake one,
right?
why didn't they just reveal it in 1960?
Because she's not going to go along with it, so they got to get rid of her.
Well, she wouldn't go along with any falsification,
Right?
but basically a good part of her life was put into making sure that secret was made public. And it's interesting because so much of her life was put into making sure that that was released in 1960, and yet the imposter, when she was interviewed in 1993, said, "Oh no, that wasn't supposed to be released to people. That doesn't need to be released, and it's just for the Pope." And a total 180-degree turn.
180-degree turn.
So, I mean, there is incredibly strange thing. But one thing, one thing that I want to say, you don't even know the half of it. When in Portugal, from what we've heard from our spies,
Right.
our
Right.
people that go in there for us and look around and talk to people, um, a lot of the property and a lot of the shops are owned by the Dos Santos family
Ah,
and by the Marto family. And so from my perspective, like, well, why aren't they interested in this? Why don't because one thing that we need is DNA evidence.
there you go.
That's part of, we don't need it, but that would be part of the case. That would be, sort of irrefutable part of the case. So we can get it even from members of the Marto family because they were cousins,
Right.
like of Lucia and the Dos Santos family, and they own a lot of the shops there. So one reason why maybe no one wants to sort of say the emperor has no clothes. It's no, I can be just as, materialistic as, anything in that regard, no, there's got to be some reason. Either they were afraid or they were so separated from the real sister, the family we're talking about. They were so separated from the real Sister Lucy that they sort of forgot what she was really like. Or, they were intimidated by, the Vatican, the priests,
Right.
and who else? Did you knew, of course, that they are the nuns in the Carmelite convent at Coimbra are associates of Opus Dei. You know that.
I
Yeah.
did not know that.
Yeah, they are.
There with Opus Dei, and I know how
The numeraries or
well.
cooperators or
Right.
I don't know the exact, I forget the exact term that they have, but they're part of the whole Opus Dei world and organization. And so don't tell me Opus Dei wasn't involved, just like the Vatican had to be involved. They're not going to get rid of the real Sister Lucy without the Vatican, the most famous nun in the world,
Right.
without the Vatican signing off on it.
Have you been approached or pressured by, the powers that be to show?
No, I'm too small to be pressured like that. So they just try to laugh it off. And I'll give you an example from the Fatima shrine. On two occasions, someone went, someone who works for the Fatima shrine, the one you went to,
Right.
two, they went to the Coimbra convent and interviewed a couple of nuns, Carmelites, about this accusation that there was an imposter Sister Lucy. Of course, neither of the nuns, even though one was older, she knew Sister Lucy for the first time in 1973. So she didn't even know. She never encountered the real Sister Lucy, anyways. And the other nun was like 30 years old. And so she only knew the fake Sister Lucy as, a young, as an old nun. So, but they interviewed them, and at the end they asked a good number of questions about this. And it's the first time that the Fatima shrine has ever raised the issue of an imposter Sister Lucy. And of course they laugh it off. Ha 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 ha, because they don't have any empirical refutation of my facts that I've collected, that have been verified by a whole array.
Oh, but that's how the game is played. They just, deflect, obfuscate.
Right.
I'm gonna wrap things up here. It's been a fascinating romp with you. Thanks for coming on. But I want you to weigh in on this. Cardinal Ratzinger, when he was Pope, and I believe that was a Jesuit coup, by the way. I believe that Benedict, they just
Oh, you mean in 2013?
that was a coup. That was a Jesuit coup.
Probably.
Ratzinger when asked about Fatima, distanced himself from Fatima. He said that was for, and I have the quote, that was for another time. He distanced himself from Fatima and said, nope, that's for another time. We're not going to go there. And then Francis comes in and dedicates his entire pontificate to Our Lady of Fatima. So it's a whole one.
Yeah, one thing about that, in that 2000 letter, which Cardinal Ratzinger wrote, attached to that, vision that they released,
Right.
it basically says that, the message of Fatima is a thing of the past.
That's
it
my
had
point.
it had, but I mean, they're interpreting it as the church's struggle with communism during all those decades, which that's not what the third secret's about. Clearly, that's what the second secret's about. But so he did say that, but later on, he did say something. I'm just quoting from memory.
Okay.
That something like the Fatima events or the Fatima message has not been fulfilled yet, or something like that, or is ongoing, something to that effect. Oh, he sort of changed his tune, because if it was all over with the fall of communism, in Europe and Russia in 1991, well, then it wouldn't still have any effect now, and it would all be over, and that was a thing of the past. But I believe that the third secret's about something that's either happening now. I think it's happening now myself. I think we're living the third secret. But yeah, it's because I mean, if you say too much, you're going to have to answer the question, well, what about this Sister Lucy? And they don't want that to come out. I mean, he was 30 years in charge. Ratzinger was 30 years in charge of the whole Fatima
Right.
question and Sister Lucy, and he covered up the whole thing.
I get it. Why? That goes back to the question, why? Why? What? See, this gets into the whole, and we talked about this.
It points the whole crew. My thought is that it points the finger at the whole crew that came in to the Vatican and to power in the late 1950s, and says something about them and what they were to bring about.
I'll give you the last word, but my word will be this: if it was a UFO event, and I realize some people will say that's not a disc, but we've got the eyewitnesses. I looked up and saw a dull silver disc. We hear it over and over again. I think, and this is my take on it, it was a UFO event, and they dressed it up with Mary and this whole thing to make it acceptable. Now, that's my take, and I know we're going to disagree on that. I'll give you the last word. And by the way, I agree with you on Sister Lucia. There's something stinks to high heaven there.
Yeah. If you could send people even to our website, in which we
give us your website. Give us your website.
It's sisterlucytruth.com.
And Lucy is just Lucy, correct?
Lucy, sisterlucytruth.com. There we present all our forensic evidence from all our forensic experts, handwriting evidence, video evidence, and then we ask the Vatican, "What's this?" You have to give answers to these problems. So we both want answers from the Vatican.
No.
That's for sure. So yeah,
Peter, thanks so much for coming on the record. Really appreciate it, folks.
Okay, so great.
Check out the website. It's John. Put that link right below. Check out the website. We do have 2 films on Fatima. You can stream them, each one for $4.99. We have a different take on it, but I don't know. The truth is sometimes really, really difficult to find. And Peter, my hat is off to you for trying to chase down that rabbit hole with
Yeah, I hope we pull out some rabbits, I hope. Yeah.
It'd be great. Good day, folks. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back again. Remember, there is a supernatural world that surrounds us. Sometimes it manifests to people like you and me. Thanks for watching.